Yeah, my name is Harmon. All the work done, like, kind of in that, like, stark white is mine. I was thinking very, like, sculpturally in this round, but typically I'm very 2D. But yeah, all this kind of spawned from Evie introducing the work of Warner Rovich, and the imagery that I was kind of picking up on, the motifs, there's a lot of serpents, a lot of blue. Then I watched this documentary about like Appalachian like snake churches, like the Pentecostal snake churches, and the serpent motif just like I think perfectly lined up. I don't know if y'all know about the Pentecostal church, but it's pretty fascinating. Also kind of growing up around a lot of like Baptists, I think seeing the kind of extreme done with the like serpent handling really interests me. But sermons typically, there's live music, there's like drums and guitar. People start speaking in tongues quite literally, and eventually if someone like feels so compelled, they take out a snake that was like captured like only hours before from like rural like West Virginia, wherever the church is. And they like feel so compelled, they start like dancing around, speaking in tongues with the serpent, actively like baring its fangs. But they feel just so like overtaken by like the presence of God. They feel like it's so like a protected moment almost, but obviously it kind of leads to a lot of deaths. Then there's like families of preachers where like, well, my daddy died preaching with serpents, but I'm still gonna like continue that legacy on. I just think that the calm kind of in the eye of the storm is really fascinating, that like I'm gonna be super vulnerable in this moment and take out a snake, and I know the risk I'm taking, but I'm gonna refuse medical service because like my religious conviction is like has got me. A lot of my work deals in those kind of like extremes. Also kind of along with the extremes, a lot of my work is posterized, so these like kind of stark outlines that, yeah, just kind of like this heavy contrast to like really emphasize the light and the shadow. I really like having this kind of like looming darkness over everything, because I feel like that's the kind of energy that I'm getting from like the snake churches. Like there's something that could happen at any moment, like a drop of a hat, but like in this like quick snapshot, it's calm and it's like sensitive almost. See what the rest of my notes are. Also, one thing to note, we were kind of talking about it a little bit, but all the canvases and like the sculptural pieces that I made were from cardboard, paper, acrylic paint, and baking soda. I was really thinking about like how to reconstruct or like recycle things that I have around me. I had just moved, so I had a ton of cardboard boxes, so I started creating canvases out of it. I really enjoyed like the labor of it, and it obviously it wasn't going to turn out perfect, but I kind of loved the I was just like having this laborious process that, I don't know, is naturally going to be kind of wonky. I really enjoyed like the recreation and it not quite being right, so you can kind of see the human hand in it. But yeah, that's where my work is kind of coming
from. Hi, I'm Esther Bach. My work is all the prints on panels. There's kind of two bodies of work here. There are the 9 panels in the series 812 Mississippi Avenue, which was my BFA thesis piece, which kind of synopsis of it, I made a model of my childhood home at 812 Mississippi Avenue from memory. All the rooms were modular. It was like a small paper cut model, and I could move the rooms around and photograph it in these really dramatic lighting in the dark room. And then I turned those into prints using the mezzotint process, which I'll get into. And I was just thinking about how a lot of my dreams take place in that house that I haven't been to in 11 years now. but it's always jumbled. None of the rooms ever connect like the correct way. So that was what that body of work was thinking about, but the stuff I made specifically for the show is behind me. It kind of spawned from two separate points. I was, over the summer at the very beginning, I read The Virgin Suicides, and I was just like blown away by that book and the imagery in it. There's like these long passages all about the house that the 5 Lisbon girls live in, which if you don't know what The Virgin Suicides is, basically follows like this family. One of the young girls commits suicide, and it's like the aftermath of it leading to all the other 4 daughters committing suicide as well. But there's just like these passages where they're just describing the neighborhood, this like perfect cookie cutter suburban neighborhood, and the house of the Lisbons like slowly deteriorating, and like the shingles coming off, the leaves never getting raked, and how it just like starts to be a stand-in for this family unit that's dissolving like in real time. So that was like heavy on my mind at the beginning of the summer when I started my residency. And then my mom sent me a bunch of photos she had found of the house she was a baby in, where her mom, who passed away when she was about 3 or 5, was like an amateur home decorator. She like did it as a hobby, but was also like in like a certified card member holding Texan interior decorator. There was like a society for interior decorators there. I have a picture of the card. It's really cool. But she had decorated and like furnished this whole home. And there's all these photos of the house, I think probably for her own like records of what it looked like. And they're all taken like at night, and they're kind of creepy, and I just loved the way they looked, and I loved how it was like it in my family but steps removed, in that I've never met my mom's mom because she died before my mom could even really like form memories of her, and so it's like familial but not, and it just, there's so much separation, and that's also kind of why the framing of it is like window frames, thinking of how the print and then the margins of the print can come together to make like a full image that makes it feel like you're looking through the windows of a house. And yeah, I'm just like really in love with mezzotin especially, and how it ties into the imagery. So mezzotin is an intaglio printmaking process, meaning you're applying ink to the surface, and it's there's some kind of texture on the surface that it's sticking to, and some of it is smooth, so you're wiping it away from those parts. A lot of the time it's an acid-based process, so you'll put some kind of ground on a plate, scratch into the ground, work it with acid, take the ground off, and the ink will sit in those lines that the acid ate away at. Mezzotin is an entirely physical process, so you're building up the ground manually with this curved steel blade that has a bunch of little points on it. You're moving it across the plate at a bunch of different angles over and over. It builds up this tooth across the entire plate that kind of has like a weave structure, and it would print completely black, or brown in my case, because that's the color ink I like. And then you use steel tools to scrape away at that texture, burnish it down, and that's kind of how you get all the light back into it. So it's a reductive process rather than additive, and I really like that it feels like I'm in some ways like sculpting a little bit with light, and also like this like push and pull that happens. It's so satisfying, and it creates these prints that there's really no other way to make something that looks exactly like it. There's like, it's not super popular anymore as a print process, just because it takes like hours and hours and hours to rock like a tiny plate. But it's just like such a unique thing. Like, if you haven't looked super up close at the prints, I really recommend you do, because there's like some really rewarding small textural details that are really like only possible because of the process. And it's like a meditative process for me. So yeah, that's what I got.
Yeah, I think that meditative part of the process, that's something I feel like we all kind of could see in all of our work, and kind of the way that we thought about forming this show together. Yeah, so I want to say thank you to SK and the curatorial team. In many ways, I feel like it was a dream come true to like see all of our work together. I feel like it just makes a lot of sense to see it all together, and a lot of people kept telling us that, like, oh, this feels like a really cohesive show. And it's funny because we all like just kind of worked on our own projects and now we're just seeing it together. But yeah, so speaking on my work in specific, mine are all kind of the knitted works as well as the installation piece that includes a window that Kate built. And all these works were kind of made on my domestic knitting machine. It was made in the early 80s and late 90s. It's kind of the time range that my specific machine was made in. But yeah, in a way that was like, it's kind of fallen out of favor, this domestic knitting machine. But I just really enjoy how it's completely manual. There's no like computerized elements or electronic elements to it. It's all just hand manipulated. And it kind of adds like an element of math to the process too, which I kind of felt like was missing when I was just a pure oil painter. So it kind of engaged that like more analytical part of my brain as well. And I felt like it was just a way to kind of think about like this whole history of fiber. My aunt is a knitter and my great-grandma also was, and it just felt like kind of a way to connect to those people. Some aren't alive anymore, so it feels like a way that I can reach back into that like personal history, as well as it's just like just working with these materials, like the softness of them, and being able to build images through like a gridded process. So they do kind of start out on graph paper, so in that way they're kind of tied to that idea of the grid, which I think is also kind of working within that framework of like painting and a modernist interpretation of painting, which often plays on the grid. And they're worked row by row, so they start at the bottom and I just work my way up. And while I'm working, I'm actually looking at the back side of these works, so I don't really see what they will look like until the very end when I cast off. So it is like, I'm kind of working with abstraction in a way that I really enjoyed working with when I was oil painting as well. So kind of speaking on like the thematic nature of the works, I think these two, which might be a little hard to see from over there, really speak to that. What I was trying to get to with a lot of the works in this show. This top one here, it says, I wanted my life to be like this music, and it kind of ends with that comma, but it's a quote from I Had Nowhere to Go by Jonas Mekas, and the end, what comes after the comma is one great fugue, but it's not included in that work. But a fugue, according to Wikipedia in classical music, it's Latin. I think it kind of translates to flight or escape, but it's a contrapuntal polyphonic compositional technique in two or more voices built on a subject or a musical theme that is introduced at the beginning and reoccurs frequently throughout the course of the composition. So it kind of speaks to that idea of pattern making, and I think maybe what Mekas was trying to get to by saying he wanted his life to be like that is maybe he wanted to search for patterns, whether that was images or sounds, or it's hard to say. It's a very open passage, but I think that's what I wanted to lean into, like that mystery that he kind of alluded to. So in a way, I think looking at patterns, and specifically as SK mentioned in my artist bio, I was kind of looking at tile patterns and weaving patterns, and I think the tile patterns was really interesting because we came across this project that David Wojnarowicz did called Rimbaud in New York, and he kind of put on the face of Arthur Rimbaud, a poet, a French poet from earlier, but there's this one specific image of him like laying on tile with that mask on, and it just felt like these themes, like the tile kept coming up. Kate had done some pieces with tile in it too, so that kind of felt like a fugue where things just kept coming up. And I think that just, I think in my practice that's what I try to kind of lean into, is like images or themes that I do keep coming back to, whether that's things I'm reading, things I'm seeing. In particular, I think like the nocturne is very present here too, so kind of these like moonlit scenes happening at night. There's just something about like the quietness, I think, that gets me about those. But I think also in like kind of working with Esther's themes, I was thinking about like what the home could mean. Yeah, I think like trying to find pattern is a way to find meaning, but also like a way to find like a home. And if home might not even be a place, it might just be like kind of a state of mind, or like a place you can like find solace in. And for me, I think that's like part of that for me is like my practice and the slow process, the meditative process of knitting. And I think one more thing I kind of wanted to bring up maybe about the installation is the pattern that's made up on the wallpaper is a graph drawing I did, and it's a weaving pattern called Rattlesnake. And I was kind of thinking, I was looking at that pattern, I was intrigued by the pattern without knowing what the name of the pattern was, and I think like the rattlesnake was another like weird fugue moment with Kate's work, so.
Wow.
Full circle.
Yeah. Beautiful. Thank you so much for sharing like about your work. At this point, does anyone have any questions for our artists?
I don't know, I guess, Evie's previous work. So you said you were an oil painter. What were you kind of exploring before? Like with your,
It was,
I guess I'm curious how like weaving changed, or not weaving, sorry, knitting changed your practice.
I don't think it really changed the way I was thinking about the work too much. My oil paintings, at least the most recent body of work, I think, was also kind of based on like literature. They were kind of abstract, like landscape images, based on like passages from War and Peace, book by Leo Tolstoy. So I think they're pretty similar to like the landscape images I've knit, but yeah, thematically I think still kind of dealing with the same things. Yeah.
Any other questions?
I do have a question.
Oh, another one. We're going right behind you.
How long does a mezzotint take?
Oh.
Like one, or like, is each kind of in the ones behind you? Is each panel of the four like one plate?
So it's 4 plates, and then just printed on like an acetate, or not printed on acetate, but there's like an acetate, what am I looking for? Like registration grid that I use.
Oh.
So I'm just lining it up all together. But yeah, it's each one of those, like those are 4 by 5.5 inch plates. Took on average like 4 to 5 hours to rock. And then, yeah, oh, that's nothing. But then you're like, oh wait, I did 8 of those, and then
But then you gotta burnish them too.
burnish them and then print them, and then that middle plate is actually mounted smaller than the print actually is. I rocked a full sheet of copper, which is 24 by 18 inches, and that took. I should have done a more careful job, like calculating how much time. But I think I put it at like 24 to 30 hours of rocking. Somewhere in there of like, it was like a month of going into the studio for like 5 hours every day when I could.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I started rocking that one in like late August, and I finished rocking it right at the beginning of October. So it's not a long time to work on something, but I really like what I enjoy so much about the rocking process is that it gives me so much time to think about what I want to put on the plate. It's like I'm so much more intentional about the image that goes on it, because it's like, it took me a long time to just build up the surface, and there's no real going back when you start burnishing on these plates. I mean, you could re-rock the plate, but that's just like a whole nother beast. you have to like, yeah. So it's really, just gives me a lot of time to think about what kind of imagery I want to put on it, compositionally, and I guess very, very time consuming in a way that I love.
That's awesome. Feels like the three of you, like all of your work is a labor of love. Like there's a lot that goes into it. So it's kind of fun to hear the process also behind the work.
Question back here.
My question for Esther is, because I've seen her rock these plates, and I still don't really know if she makes a mistake, if it can be undone, if you can re-rock it. For me, like, can you erase things?
I feel like it's more like learning to correct it by adjusting around it. Like if I feel like I've overworked an area a little bit, not so much being able to rock it back and make it darker, but adjusting the values around it to make it fit in better. Like there were moments on the house in the middle, like, well, I don't want to point out, but I moments where I was like, maybe I pushed it too far, but then it's about finding a balance. But yeah, there's no undo button necessarily. It's in metal, so it's like, it's in there. It remembers also. The metal, like, knows what it wants to do sometimes.
Anyone else have a question?
I also really enjoyed the descriptions of your processes, and especially I think both Esther and Evie talked about processes as being almost like a little bit obsolete, right? Like people don't do this anymore because now there are computers and you can do it a lot faster. And so it makes your work kind of feel a little bit like a throwback to an earlier era. Is that part of what you're thinking about? I mean, you always, do you want to be living, 50 years previously, or how does that, like that temporal element or the element of kind of recency?
Yeah, I think for me, like a lot of my work is looking at older forms of things, like artists that aren't with us anymore, what they had to say, what they went through, that events we don't have to live through anymore. So in a way, I like that element of older processes, and yeah, it feels like things have just gotten like maybe too easy. So I do like, in that way, like a restriction on the process in kind of choosing like an older form of doing something.
I think for me, it's also, I feel like there is a push in our world to just go as fast as possible. I think it's like tied intrinsically to like capitalism and this need to like produce, and in like a small way, maybe I'm fighting against that by saying like, no, it's gonna take time, and that's actually the beauty of it, and that if you want this to be fast, it won't be the same. Like it just simply can't exist in a mode of production like that. And yeah.
Kate, does any of that resonate with you? I didn't hear you talk as much about that.
I'd say yes.
This take a really long time to
Yeah.
build, yeah.
Because there's so much dry time,
Yes,
and it's like, and you could just buy a prefabricated canvas or just a roll of
It's
canvas.
pretty wild. Yeah, if anyone wants to see the back of
Exactly.
one, I really encourage you to like look at the back.
And like even with
crazy.
the wooden piece or the like window, it has like a squish to it if you like press on it too, because like it's very tactile. Even with like the layers of like baking soda that I've like added to like fill in like gaps or just like to kind of create that texture over top. It's like you kind of bounce between all of these different pieces, and typically I'm like a one at a time sort of person, so this like forced me to work with like more of a narrative in my mind as well. So like I'd kind of shift between like thinking about like serpents, or thinking about like the church as an institution as well. So like it is kind of meditative, and you think specifically about what you're doing and what will go on top of these like constructed cardboard canvases. And like it's a throwaway material, but like how can I put something like really pivotal or like important on it? it was really entertaining to build them.
I will say, so for reference, I'm Kate's like studio neighbor. I can hear that it's a labor of love because it's like I don't know what you're doing. It's like
I was sanding it down.
Oh,
Yeah. I know.
I'm
you're
sorry.
doing the work.
That was really loud. I'm
We don't.
sorry.
That's okay.
we don't apologize. Yeah.
Trust that the rocket gets a little loud.
Does the table shake?
Yeah, and it's like if I go fast enough, yeah.
Reach a flow state.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm really like, I think the time element is like really interesting. It takes a long time for each of you to like build the canvas out of cardboard, to like actually like knit the surface, to rock the surface. And then you're thinking about like Rebecca's question about these processes that are like a bit older. And then Evie's talking about like, I'm like looking back through literary sources. Like there are so many like throwbacks to different like older like ways of thinking, I think. That's really beautiful. And then you're like finding old photographs and you're like looking at someone else's potential like memory. So then I'm thinking about like, how do you actually finally decide like, this is the image that I want to dedicate all of this time to? Like, how do you decide which ones, you know?
I like I stewed on it for a really long time. I did a ton of different sketches of different like baptism scenes. I tried like other kind of domestic spaces. I put them on like tiny pieces of paper and I like would move them around, then like leave studio, then come back and figure out a better arrangement that like, I don't know, as I was kind of like continuing to develop the narrative and like even tying like personal experience into the work as well. I just felt like the arrangement really resonated. There's like interior spaces being explored, exterior spaces, there's quietness, there's an eerie stillness to all these images, and I think they like all kind of click together in my brain.
I think for me, it's about like finding the image that feels the most like heavy charge, like there's something there where I could just like stare at it forever. And like another thing with the photos my mom supplied me with, it was like there wasn't that many of them. So it's, you know, of the 12 I have, which ones really speak to me? You know, which one feels like I wish that I could go sit in this house and just stare at this corner of the room. And with the middle piece, it was actually I was with my roommate Chloe, who's here. We were picking up an iPod off Facebook Marketplace, and we were parked next to this house, and I was looking at it, and I was just like so fascinated by how it was so overgrown, and I just snapped a photo of it, and that had to have been in like June. Didn't think about it for months, and then when I was like, I had been rocking this plate, and honestly rocking it with no real end goal of like, what am I going to put on this plate? I had a few ideas floating around in my head, and sometimes it's just like, okay, let's look back at, because I take a lot of photos of like exteriors of houses I see that I find interesting, moments in my own house, like light reflecting and things like that I'm like, I want to come back to this at some point. And when I saw that in my camera roll, I was like, that just has the stillness, the weight, something there that I'm like, I can really focus a lot of time to this, and I think that it's worthy of the surface I've built up for it.
Yeah, for me, like I mentioned, the knit pieces start off as drawings on graph paper, and I really try to like spend a good chunk of time just making as many, researching patterns, looking through books, and trying to just do as many as I can with those, and I'll just have them laying around, and if I'm on the fence, if I think something will work or not, I will just end up making it, and I'll just see what it looks like as a knit. And if it doesn't work out, I can just rip it out and use the yarn for another project. I think that's part of the reason why I also just love this medium, is it is pretty reversible, and you can undo things pretty easily as well, so.
And then I have one more follow-up question. All three of you have like a very like toned down palette, which I think also like really like lends the work to each other. So I'm curious how you think about color.
I think for me, like, it does really come down to the literary influence
Yeah.
as well. I think a lot of the writing I'm drawn to are these scenes of dimly lit areas, like nighttime scenes. So I try to kind of keep the palette to, I don't know, some dark, it just feels moonlit, or it just feels like it's dark or old, or yeah. So for me, it is kind of simple in that I have to work with yarn, so it is kind of a process of just selecting the yarn in the beginning, and that already kind of limits the color palette for me, because the more colors you add, the crazier the process gets, and sometimes distilling it down is really helpful. So yeah.
I think part of my Mezzotin itself, you can print it in multiple colors. You can like selectively ink the plate, or have multiple plates that have different like color layers. But because I'm working with a single plate, it is, and I'm not doing selective inking, it's gonna be monochrome. And traditionally they're printed in black ink on white paper. That's how you get like what they're highly valued for is like the range of value you can get. You can get the brightest whites by like completely burnishing a plate so that there's no ink, and you can get super, super rich blacks. And I have printed these in black and white before. I find it too intense. I think it doesn't suit the imagery. I think it's like a sterileness when it's printed in black and white. I think that like the warmth of the tan paper and the like burnt umber ink is just like vital. I think that there's also like a history of like sepia toned images, photographs, and kind of like in your mind, they're not photographs, but there is something photographic about them being in that color palette, and something like historical about them. And yeah, it like makes them feel a little old, which I love old things. So
yeah, I think posterization is like a huge part of my process, so it naturally becomes kind of black and white for me. I've slowly incorporated kind of getting more into rendering, but I still like to kind of keep the intensity, that like darkness, again, like kind of looming over the image. I typically steer away from color. I like having just like the simplicity. I don't want to like overcomplicate things, but I like couldn't get ultramarine blue like out of my head after reading the book with Evie. Blue just like kept like ringing in my head. So I figured if I don't want to like mess up the original image that I'm kind of working on, I could still have like that glow behind it. So like
So cool.
I painted the back, so it has like that hue around it. Then I incorporated watered down ultramarine into like the wood grain, or like the sides of the window, or like in between the like tiles. So like I want to like hold on to the subtlety, but still I'm working on exploring kind of color in a way.
Yeah, I think that's like interesting, because I think the like that there is this kind of missing component. Like none of these are like full color. I think that like really speaks to the concepts, and like does something really beautiful. So yeah. Any other questions? Okay, well this was so lovely. Thank you so much for sharing your work with us. We're gonna now transition to view of the film. Very excited, so yay.